Welcome back. I'm Gary Parr, and you are listening to Fiber Talk, the twice weekly podcast for needlework artists. And our artist this week from England is Tanya Bentham, and our topic is going to be Opus Anglicanum embroidery.
Thank you.
Yeah. Amazing work. Completely self-taught, huh? You taught yourself, but still you were raised in a kind of creative family.
Well, I taught myself because in the early 90s, there wasn't really anybody teaching medieval embroidery. My mother's family were coach painters and toy makers, but there's not really anybody in the family that does textiles. My grandmother knitted and found any kind of sewing absolutely hateful, so she was no help.
She knitted but hated sewing. Okay.
Oh, yeah.
Sounds like she was quite vocal about it.
Yeah. She couldn't teach me to knit either, and I think that just really annoyed her.
Oh, okay. Okay. I've tried that a couple times. I can't get the rhythm of the knitting. It doesn't
Well,
work.
turns out I can do basic knitting. I don't like anything where you have to count, but although I'm right-handed, my grandmother tried to teach me right-handed knitting, and apparently I knit left-handed, so that's why. And also she was quite short-tempered about it, so that didn't help.
So that's not a good environment, no.
No.
No, those knitters that can sit there and carry on a full conversation and out the other end comes a scarf. That always just amazes me, the ability they have, but I can't do it.
I can do a scarf. It's anything more complicated than that's beyond me.
Yeah. So then what takes you to embroidery? I mean, how if you don't have that in the family, how do you discover it?
When I was about 16, I started doing reenactment. I actually started in the English Civil War Society, which is 17th century stuff. And I joined the King's Army because I was 16 and shallow, and the Royalists had better costumes. So I just wanted, and then I went into medieval embroidery, and I wanted embellished costumes. So I started sewing. Some of my early stuff was just absolutely dreadful because I couldn't get on my budget or where I was geographically, couldn't get proper gold threads like I would use today. I was using that awful gold stuff that was produced for crochet. And it was pretty awful. But it took me a while to sort of figure out what the right stitches were and teach myself them. I started off with laden couch work, which is sometimes known as bier stitch. So that's a fairly easy one to pick up yourself.
Mm-hmm.
I moved into the more sophisticated stuff with Opus Anglicanum.
Yeah. So the making costumes then you gravitated more toward the trimmings than the actual sewing.
I gravitated more towards the really high-end stuff.
Okay.
I really, really silk. So, and sometime in my 20s, I started going to silversmithing classes as well, because you can't do that sort of costume without the accessories, and you couldn't buy them back then. So I thought, right, I'll try and make them. And I started doing silversmithing as well.
No.
But it's all sort of a bit organic and holistic, all fits together.
Yeah. So then how do you find medieval embroidery in Opus Anglicanum? For you, you've locked into that for years now. How does that come to you?
Well, it's that thing that you think, oh, well, this is an interesting topic, I'll do a little face. And I think for most people, it's the little faces that they start with, because they're sort of lovely and sculptural, and you're using the shapes and things. But actually, it's just an absolutely vast topic. I mean, the V&A exhibition a few years ago, that's what people were looking at. People were looking at the faces, and I was wandering around thinking, oh, yes, I've done faces. I'm fairly familiar with those. Oh, look what they've done with the ground beneath this horse's feet, or look what they've done with this flower. And also, I think, and that was one of the aims of writing my first book, I think Opus Anglicanum shouldn't be treated as this sort of dusty technique that's only used for reproducing original artifacts. I think it has huge amounts of potential as an expressive modern form of needlework. I mean, I've done very modern things like the three living and the three dead, and the little puffin design that I've done. I've recently finished the Maiden, Mother, and Crone, which is a modern retelling of the three archetypes of femininity using designer logos and modern references. And I've also just finished a piece based on the Parthenon marbles in the British Museum, because my degree was classics, so I kind of responded to that and used Opus Anglicanum to tell a much more modern needlework story through that.
Yeah, that's what I enjoyed about your work was the modern version and always you're always telling a story of some kind, but because you do the older stuff, but then there's stories, especially the new stuff, and you kind of have a sass and an attitude toward it. I really enjoy really enjoy them.
I earned my living for many years as a storyteller telling stories, so I respond to stories. I think everybody does.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what TV is, it's what movies is. It's not just about books, there are stories in everything. And medieval art is very narrative. One of the pieces I did, the Recuhilde Antipendium, it's basically a cartoon strip and it sums up a lot of what I find interesting and attractive about medieval art, because there is that very narrative aspect. I mean, my friend Marta and I recently visited Haddon Hall, and it's got all of the medieval wall paintings that have been revealed. And we were sat there because she's a medievalist who teaches at Leeds University. We were sat there reading the stories and trying to figure out who was who. And I think in modern art, we've kind of lost that, because modern art is designed to be explained to you when you get this abstract piece of just blank canvas with a blue stripe on it or something. Whereas medieval art is full of symbolism and you're meant to be able to read it, so that even if you are literate, I think most people would have been more artistically literate than we are today, because they would have had this language of being able to read an image. And that was kind of part of what I was trying to do with the maiden part of Maiden, Mother, and Crone, because a medieval person would have looked either at a painting or a sculpture or even at a person and judged them instantly on their clothing. And we've kind of lost a lot of that, but instead we've replaced it with designer logos, that we don't look at the quality of the cloth, we don't look at the cut and the practicality of it anymore. We look at the designer logos. So part of my point with the maiden was that this sort of, it is, I think, much more of a youthful obsession with the designer labels, and the status that gave very much corresponds to the language of medieval clothing and textiles.
Yeah. And that whole image oriented thing in medieval times, people couldn't read, so they didn't have a choice. But really a skill there in telling stories that way.
Well, I think it's something humans have always done,
Yeah.
and it's something we still try to do, but I think the language changes. I mean, we still use movies to share a story, and costume is still important in movies, whether we realise it or not. I just think medieval people were more aware of the language of clothing than we are now.
Oh.
And embroidery is part of that.
Yeah. Do you have a historical uh, uh, gene in you that makes the history interesting, or is it strictly the needlework, the textile art that
I've
drives?
always been interested in history. That was my main focus at school. And then as an undergraduate, I did archaeology, and then I did classical studies. So I was always quite interested in the Greek and Roman world. I was very much interested in the role. I'm not really interested in sort of big picture history. I'm not interested in battles and warfare. I find them incredibly boring. And my ex-partner being a reenactor just makes that even more boring, because male are just obsessed with swords to an absolutely pathetic degree. Um, my current scientist, and when I first met him, he was helping me unload my vehicle, and I happened to have a sword in it, and I handed it to him. And I thought, oh, here we go. He's going to be waving it around, thinking he's Zorro, and I'm going to have no end of this. I'm going to hear nothing else all night. And he just took this sword and he said, where do you want me to put this? And I just thought, do you know what? That's the sexiest thing a man has ever said to me. He's not interested in the sword. He just knows where I want him to dump it.
Oh, that's good. That's good. Yeah. So that makes this all come together. Is the history speaks to you, the non-war part of history speaks to you, and then the needlework.
I'm interested in social and domestic. I'm interested in artifacts. I'm interested in medicine. I'm interested in women through history. And I'm very interested in textiles and their social currency. I mean, one of the things on my sort of bucket list of textile reproductions to do is a thing called the impruneta cushion, which is a 14th century Italian cushion that was produced. It's called the Welsh patchwork sometimes. It was produced by a bishop's niece to go under his head when he died. And it's made up of tiny scraps of fabric. A lot of them are less than half an inch square. And these fabrics were so valuable that this incredibly wealthy family was still recycling on this minuscule scale to make a decorative.
Wow. One thing I learned from you doing research is Opus Anglicanum. I have a hard time getting that out. Before and after the Black Death, I had no idea that there was and there's a distinct difference in the art.
There is. They think that a lot of the workers in London, because the vast majority would have been in London, died during the Black Death, and that there was then this boom of pieces coming in from the continent where they were doing the much quicker techniques of not rounding the shapes in the faces. They were basically just doing a needle painting technique, and they were using surface couching with the gold work, and they were filling large areas quickly with things like laden couchwork in silk with a gold over the top, and all these considerably quicker than the finicky, much chewier techniques of Opus Anglicanum. I attended a symposium at St John's College in Oxford a couple of years ago, in which somebody was trying to argue that the later style of Opus Anglicanum isn't easier, it's just different. But no, it's easier and it's quicker. And that makes it a lot less interesting. I mean, I'm trying to put together a proposal at the moment. I want to write a second book of Opus Anglicanum and look into the differences more and how those differences can be used creatively. But I think it very much is, I've used some of those techniques. It is much quicker.
Mm-hmm.
I think early period Opus Anglicanum is more interesting because, well, my editor, I was very annoyed. She pulled my favourite quote from the introduction of the Opus Anglicanum book, because I'd put, in the words of Bananarama, Opus Anglicanum, it's not what you do, it's the way that you do it. You're only using 2 stitches, but you're using them incredibly precisely and in a very finicky way. Whereas with the later period, they, filling the area in a much quicker way by using these quicker techniques. And also, it's not as robust. In the later period, they're doing surface couching. which is much, much quicker. But underside couching, because you're pulling little bits of the gold through the fabric, what you're actually doing is building resilience into it. If you have a large area of surface couching and you catch it, you can rip huge amounts of that gold off the surface of your work. With underside couching, if you catch one of the gold threads, the most you can rip out is 3 stitches.
Mm-hmm.
With surface couching, if you scrunch it up in a ball in your hands, you might as well then chuck it in a bin, because you're never quite going to get it straight again. Whereas underside couching is meant to be bent. It's meant to have movement and life in it. And what the underside couching does is it allows for movement. You can take a piece of underside couching and you can scrunch it into a ball and you can unravel it and it's fine. It's much more resilient and it's much tougher, because we tend to forget in the modern era that needlework used to have a life. It was worn, it was used, it wasn't always just stuck on a wall and looked at as we do with embroidery now.
So, okay, then that explains to me why you go with the pre-Black Death approach. There's more you can do with it.
I think it's a
Durability
much
is.
interesting style of needlework than the later stuff. It's like I can appreciate all the work that goes into Jacobean stump work, but for me, there are just too many stitches in it. Medieval embroidery is very simple. You rarely get a piece that uses more than 3 different stitches, even in huge things. I mean, the Bayer tapestry, the scale of that, there's like 2 stitches in it.
Right. I know. Yeah, and it's massive. Yeah. So basically after the Black Death, then it sounds like people were going for this is a bad phrase, but quick and dirty, but taking shortcuts to try to achieve the same thing.
Well, it was because of commercial competition. They couldn't afford to spend time on that sort of high art, craftsman-like approach.
Mm-hmm. Is there still a lot of pieces from before the Black Death, the older style, available that you can study, or is that pretty limited?
There's a few. There's the Pienza Corp and the Scion Corp and quite a few bits in the British Museum. And there are little bits and purses and fragments scattered all over the place. There's a German Technical Institute that has a huge collection, and a lot of what they have is just little scraps. The huge pieces that survive tend to survive on the continent, because in this country they were burnt for their gold. So you threw something like that on the fire and then you retrieve the gold. So, which sounds horrendous. And I think that really what has survived is the absolute tip of the iceberg. I mean, not every church would have had an Opus Anglicanum corp, or even, an Opus Anglicanum altar frontal. But one of the things somebody else was talking about at the conference at St. John's was they'd taken the records of an ordinary parish church, and this ordinary parish church had dozens of corps because it needed them for every church official in every colour of the liturgical seasons. So it was quite a lot. I mean, in reality, for most parish churches, that might have meant wool corps that matched, or it might have meant silk brocade. They wouldn't have had as much embroidery as what does survive, but it just sort of gives you a perspective of how much there must have been.
Yeah.
How little survives.
Yeah. And that's just so sad, but you can understand, especially if people are after the gold.
We lost the Great Library of Alexandria as well, and archaeologists are trying to pick little bits of it back together from burnt bits of paper and mummy wrappings. It's what happened.
Yeah. Oh, that came up the other day. I forget. I think it was watching the game show Jeopardy here in the States. And every now and then I'll think about that library in Alexandria. If we still had that, what we would know.
Stuff in this country as well. I mean, we have a lot of things that are tagged MS Harley in the British Library, and they're from a library that burnt down a private collection, and most of it was managed to be saved. But when you think of, how much of history just gets routinely destroyed, like, Tudor houses being knocked down post-war because they were thought unfit for habitation, and the stately homes in this country that were bulldozed because they didn't want to pay the taxes on them. It's kind of the way history works. All survival is lucky.
Yeah, yeah. So as you were exploring and learning this technique, a lot of time spent in museums and churches studying the pieces, or is it a technique that once you get the concept, you can pretty much just go?
Um, I think it's one where you have to keep going back and looking at the original pieces. I mean, I usually have at least one trip a year down to the V&A to see the pieces that are on display. But there are also pieces that aren't accessible to the public that you need to rely on photographs and books. And also, I mean, V&A pieces, it's lovely to go and look at them, but sometimes the only way you can look at the back of them is the photographs.
Right, right.
And it's nice to have photographs to reference when you're working as well.
Yeah,
I take a lot of inspiration from manuscripts and things. I mean, the piece that's behind me, no, it's on that side. The piece that's behind me with the ploughman's boy, oh, it's on that side. The piece that's behind me with the ploughman's boy, that's the fourth of my Luttrell Psalter pieces, which I'm working in laid and couched work. It's kind of been on hold a bit because of the books and because of everything else going a bit mental the last few years. But the inspiration of that is purely from the Luttrell Psalter. And when I first discovered the Psalter, I was going down to the British Museum, and the members' room has a cheap copy of the Psalter. And I got so obsessed with it, my dad bought me a really nice Folio Society copy. So that's about as close as you can get to handling the original book.
yeah,
Manuscripts are just full of mad stuff from the Middle Ages. It's what inspires a lot of my kits, just
right,
because they're so simple.
yeah. Now, when you go to museums and are able to see these things, are you only able to see what's on display, or have you been able to get back in the storage room and actually have stuff on a table in front of you? And
I'm trying to do that at the moment with a couple of pieces. There are things, because I'm from the north of England and most big museums are in the south. I would quite like to use a couple of the northern pieces as inspiration. So on my list of things to do this week is I want to email the Bar Convent and ask if I can get a better look at. They've got a piece in there that's from Ilkley, I think, and I was born in Durham City. Usher College in Durham City, they have a cope that they wear for very special occasions, which is a late period opus. So I'm hoping to go and study things like that and have a little look
yeah,
and maybe use inspiration for the fourth book.
yeah. Because I agree with you. Some people get all offended if you want to look at the back of their stitching, but to me, you learn so much from seeing the back side. I like it.
I'm not obsessive about making the back really neat. I think that's very much a Victorian thing. And if you look at the back of some of the Opus Anglicanums, they're pretty messy. But I try not to focus on it too much as a teacher, because I think it's occasionally used as a gatekeeping method to keep new stitches in their place. And I don't believe in that.
Yeah.
I believe in imagination.
Now, I also found it fascinating that, I mean, you buy metal threads and silk, but you dye all of your own wool. I mean, you are pretty self-contained when it comes to your work.
Well, it started must be nearly 20 years ago. I wanted to do the replica of the Recuhild Antipendium that I talked about. And I had dyed my own wools and I had sewn with them in the past, but I'd also used a lot of Appletons. And I thought, well, I could buy from my friend Debbie, but at the time I was pretty skint, and I figured out that, buying that much wool from Debbie was going to cost me about £500, or I could dye it myself for about 80.
Uh,
So And then I just thought, you know what? If I'm going to do this seriously, I'm just throwing out all the Appletons and I'm just going to work with natural dyes because I can do this. It's not too bad. But it does get to the stage now where I have sort of 10 kilos of embroidery wool delivered and that has died.
Yeah.
So it's I do it in the garage actually because Gareth doesn't like me doing it in the kitchen. I'm very messy and I make a mess in the kitchen. It's all about tidiness, but we figured out a system for working in the garage because there's a hose pipe there, so it
Yeah.
works.
Yeah.
I mean, really, if you can, the vast majority of naturally dyed colours, if you can make chicken stock, you can dye thread because things like madder and weld are exactly the same principle. You just put it in a pan, you leave it on a low heat, you do not poke it, and you leave it for a couple of hours and you don't boil it, and it's fine. It's only when you get to things like indigo, which are fermentation processes, indigo and woad, that it gets a little bit more complicated. But even then, it's pretty straightforward.
And so for all of your kits and all of your classes, you dye all of your own wool so that it's an
If
annual dyeing festival for you.
Yeah, no, if it's laden couch work, if it's wool, it's I'm going to use naturally dyed stuff because it's just nicer as well. There's a resonance to the colours in natural dyes that they never really clash in the same way that aniline dyes do, that chemical dyes do. They're much more harmonious, and I think colour is important. There is a rhythm of the way people use colour in medieval embroidery that you know, if you use a colour once, then that colour stands out. But if you use, say, if you choose one shade of red and you use it several times, it becomes part of the composition. The only time I'll use, say, a bright red once in a composition is when I want that thing to stand out and be the most visible thing, because by using a little bit of red here and there, you're blending the red into the rest of the colours. But if you use it just once, it sort of sticks out like a sore thumb.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Now, in your work, the colors are so vibrant. Is that also a result of dyeing your own? It just seems like there's an extra level of intensity in the color.
One of my pet hates is when people do reproductions of historical needlework and match the colours to what the Bayeux tapestry or whatever it is looks like now. Because when you do that, you're just sort of perpetuating this myth that everything was brown back then.
Thank you.
Where
Thank you. Thank you.
And I absolutely hate that. So it's things like the Recce-Hild Antipendium. I wanted to re-dye the colours, and the guy at the museum didn't have any information on what would have been used originally. So I just thought, well, it's going to have been woad, weld, madder, maybe a few other things like walnut, and I reproduced all the colours from that. I don't mess around with things like red cabbage or weeds from hedgerows, because most dyeing in the Middle Ages, dyeing was a guild controlled practice. There were standards to be met.
Mm-hmm.
So they knew how to produce good, repeatable colours on the whole. So yeah, you do get bright colours and they are lovely. They're
Yeah.
not sort of these little mimsy pale pastel shades that everybody thinks are natural dyes. They can be really in your face.
Well, see, that's I'm so grateful to hear that because I mean I do a lot of reproduction samplers, and
Yeah.
that is the same thing. They'll use a dingy fabric, a ground cloth, and then these pale washed out colors. And then
Oh,
if you get a chance to look at the backside of a
yeah,
sampler,
they'll be the real colours.
yeah, why didn't you use those? You know,
Yeah.
what was wrong with those colors? And then you know that the fabric wasn't dirty and grungy, so why didn't you use a brighter fabric? And it's a personal frustration. Why not? Why don't we get to enjoy these colors that I know existed? They had to have existed.
I think partly it's that there is this taste for muted colours, and they're seen as being historical when they're actually not. People loved bright colour because colour had status, because colour cost money.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Oh, thank you. It's just
I'm sure people in the Middle Ages would have been absolutely appalled by that sort of rich persons having everything shades of grey in their houses,
yeah.
because they would have thought, well, you can afford it, why not have some lovely bright red there and some blue there? And
Right. Right.
so I was at Harewood House yesterday. I went for a wander around, and they've done really well at restoring all their colour of the 18th century plasterwork, and it's incredibly gaudy on some of their ceilings. It's great.
Yeah. Well, and that's the other part is so many of those pieces, when you see the true colors on the back side that haven't been in the sun for decades, a lot of them are really gaudy. Like what?
Yeah,
Yeah.
they loved colour.
Yeah.
It's like there's I sometimes do a class on gilded medieval applique. There are several pieces survive. The most notable is probably the Tristram tapestry in the V&A, because it's back to that interest in the reuse and the value of textiles, that applique was used for large scale hangings, and they were using up scraps from costumes and things, which is exactly what I do. But if you look at the Tristram tapestry when you're in the V&A, it looks very dull, because all of the edges and all of the details that were originally picked out in little thin 2 millimeter strips of gilded leather, all the gilding's turned off and black leather goes black over time.
Mm-hmm.
It looks really dull and dowdy. And then when you do a reproduction piece with the gold on it, it's just incredibly gaudy.
Yeah. Yeah. Like it should be. Yeah.
Yeah.
Wake you up. When did you know you could make a living out of doing this? Was there a point where you just flipped the switch and said, "All right, I'm gonna go for this"?
I think I'd been working towards it for years. My partner thinks I'm completely disorganized, but I actually had a plan that, I was going to write a few magazine articles just to test the water, see if I could write the instructions. I did that. And then I taught for a couple of years, and that was interesting. I'm glad I did that first before writing, because I hadn't realized all of the entertaining ways people could screw things up,
Yeah.
and then put in a book proposal. So by the time the book proposal went in, I was earning about half of my income maybe from the needlework, because I was teaching and doing stuff, and I was selling kits. But it really took off when the first book came out.
Yeah, that as a former teacher, and I still do some substitute teaching. When I read your statement about that you were glad that you had taught before you wrote books, that really resonated, because you learn so much teaching that you can't even come up.
Yeah.
You can't even imagine it if you sit down and try. Yeah.
Well, for years, I mean, I still do the odd one because I was in reenactment. I used to do school visits as a Viking or a Roman or a medieval lady, and I will still do maybe one or two a month. I don't do a lot of them now. It's mainly schools that I like. I've blacklisted all the ones I didn't like now. Because I do quite enjoy doing history with kids, and I do a lot of textiles and a lot of weaving with them. I really enjoy myself when I go and do it. But children are a lot less exhausting in some ways than 60 children for a day, because they're really into their Romans or what have you, are much less exhausting than 10 nice middle-aged middle-class ladies,
Mm.
because they need a lot of individual attention to get around things. But yeah, it's taught me all of the wonderful ways that people can misinterpret things, because when I wrote the first book, the editor lived in Romania, and she phoned me and she said, "This is a very strange book." And I thought, why? Because it's medieval embroidery. She said, "No." She said, "I edit craft books for a living, and people don't normally tell you what to do if you make a mistake. You just assume that you're going to do it first time, and you don't do it right, and you've put in all this troubleshooting stuff." And I said, "Yeah, because people need it."
Right. Right.
I mean, I genuinely believe that someone who never made a mistake never made anything. And I believe that an expert is not someone who never cocks up. An expert is someone who knows how to fix their cock-ups.
Yeah. Well, and we've heard this in interviews from highly experienced embroiderers and all techniques, is most of them are unfazed by a mistake. They just find a way to adjust for it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You have to. There's more learning experience in making a mistake and putting it right than there is in getting it right first time.
Yeah.
There's a lady called Sarah Thursfield who writes books on medieval costume for the same publisher as me. She actually put me in touch with them. And the first time I met her was before her book was published. And she was talking about, I'm writing this book so people can make their costumes better, because she waved her hand and said, people here need so much help. It was a big reenactment event. She said, you don't need that much help. She said, you don't need my help. And then we were talking, her and another lady, about how anyone who's made costumes, everybody has sewn a sleeve on the wrong way around. Mm-hmm. Usually the night before an event when you want to wear the costume. And this woman who had a very nice costume sort of overheard our conversation and said very sort of snottily, oh, well, I've never done that. And she walked away and we all just started giggling, because we thought either A, that's her first costume, in which case kudos to her because it was good, or B, liar, pants on fire.
Yeah, you got to make a few mistakes. Yeah. Talk to me about materials. Metal thread. Benton and Johnson has been your primary supplier. Are materials getting harder to get for what you do? Because you don't just use cotton, you don't use DMC, pearl, or any of that.
No, so. I am absolutely adamant that Opus Anglicanum is materials dependent. When you hear people talking about Opus Anglicanum, they focus on the gold. And academics do it a lot as well, because the original pieces, silk degrades over time, and often it's worn right down to the linen. So people focus on the gold and they go on about how shiny the gold would be in the cathedral and blah, blah, blah. And then you reproduce a piece of Opus Anglicanum using the filament silk, and the silk gives the gold a run for its money. It's got just as much shine, and it would have been just as extraordinary as the gold in a world where everybody wore wool. Mm-hmm. And I think we lose that. It's one of the virtues of reproducing something, is to see what it looked like new.
Yeah.
And can only do that with the silk by using filament silk, because no other thread, certainly not cotton, and not a spun silk either, it has to be filament, no other thread brings light into the work in the same way that gold does, because filament sparkles, and it's filament that brings those sort of banks of light that sculpt the flat surfaces of Opus Anglicanum. So I am absolutely adamant that it has to be filament silk. I generally use De Vere's silk, which are a UK-based company, so I don't really have a supply problem with that. I'd occasionally use mill ends. There are a few old silk mills around here that will sell you an off-cast pern of filament silk for weaving. I use some filaments that are designed for weaving because they're cheap and cheerful and they're nice to work with. Mm-hmm. And I use Midori Matsushima's Japanese silks as well sometimes. It's just getting the right colour for what you're doing at the time. So not really having a problem with that. I'm a bit worried that Neil might retire at Benton and Johnson.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And I think I have to send him biscuits or cakes every now and then, because I have this horrible feeling that he hates me because I'm always awkward. It's like I wanted bronze thread and he said I don't have a bronze wrapping for a thread. So I said, well, what happens if you wrap a dark gold thread round black? And he gave me this fantastic bronze. I wanted white gold and he said he didn't do it. So I nagged him until he wrapped, because I wanted rose gold, until he wrapped a white gold core around pink and gave me rose gold. So I'm always emailing and saying, can you do this? And can you do that? And he came up with the most fantastic one the other week that I nagged him about. I'll see if I can find it in my box of tangled threads. He made me a wonderful verdigris of copper. That's the white gold, that's pink, rose gold. Rose
Oh
gold,
yeah,
which is
that's a rose
boring.
gold. Yeah, sure.
So I nagged him. What happens if you wrap copper around a green core? Because I wanted something that looked like verdigris, and he came up with this. So I'm sure he hates me because I'm always like, what happens if? Can you do me a test reel of this? So I send him cake now and then to keep him happy.
Just got to bribe them somehow.
I'm an
Yeah,
awkward
yeah.
cow.
But I think that's one where whenever I talk to anyone who does a lot of gold work, that comes into my head that Benton and Johnson, if they ever shut down, what a loss that'll be. I hope they have some plan for keeping it going because, I mean,
He does have people who work with him, and there is one other guy who makes gold threads in this country, but I've never dealt with him. A younger guy, I can't remember what his name is, but someone said he's only just started up, so I might. I've not used his, so I can't remember his name.
Might have to take him some cakes. Yeah, yeah. Because there are other manufacturers in the world, India, right?
Yeah.
Where you can get stuff, but I've just always had a sense that Benton and Johnson is the pinnacle of quality and consistency.
Well, they're one of the oldest companies in the UK that's still family owned and family run. It's why this family farm tax is really worrying me, because it doesn't just apply to family farms, it applies to family businesses, and it might throw people like Benton and Johnson under the bus unless they do something about it.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
I don't know if you've heard of this. I don't know if you've heard of this in America. It's a very British issue. The new government, farm land and agricultural land used to be free of all inheritance tax, so you could pass it on to your children as a going concern. But they've now decided it's subject to inheritance tax and small businesses at the same time. And it's currently at 28% of the entire estate, over $1 million. And I mean, there are very few farms that are worth less than £1 million.
Yeah.
And it's really concerning, not just for our food supply, but for sort of small businesses like Benton and Johnson, who will be affected by it unless they make provisions.
Yeah. Oh, that is concerning. Yeah.
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 I mean, we're right on the edge of the city of Leeds here, but you can't drive out into the country without having posters everywhere of stop the family farm tax, because it is very, very destructive to small scale farming. And round here, most of the farms are pretty small scale.
Yeah.
Because of the way the landscape is.
Right. Yeah. 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 It's hard to have thousands of acres there. Yeah. Yeah.
Mm. Well, you can, but it'll probably be all moorland, and you keep 3 sheep on it. So.
Yeah. I was fascinated by the ground cloth you use, Rami.
Well, archaeologically, Rami and wool, Rami and linen tend to be lumped together because they're both plant fibers. Rami is a nettle species. And if you look at the state of textile archaeology, until very recently, it wasn't taken seriously at all. So these things tend to be lumped together. It's not that I have a particular fetish for Rami. It's that the Rami fabric I use is far, far finer in weave. I mean, most, you do samplers, you'll know this. Most like Zweigart linens and things like that, they're like 36, 40 count at most. Yeah. This stuff is more like 90 to 100. So it's really, really fine. I use it 2 layers thick. And I just find that with the silk threads, I always want to embroider a thread where the background canvas, one thread of the background canvas, is about the same weight as the thread I'm using. I find that's how you get your good coverage. It allows for a really precise placement of threads on the silk embroidery. It's also tough enough to cope with underside couching, which is a very destructive technique for the canvas. And because it's so fine, a lot of Opus Anglicanum was slip mounted. And because it's so fine, it folds under beautifully.
Hmm.
And you can mount very, very precisely without having to put a big bulky gold board around to cover everything that isn't covered by being folded under. So, I mean, if I could get a quality linen that was the same count, I'd use it. But the Rami stuff I get, I just use it because it's very, very practical. For most of my wool embroidery, I work on a wool fabric. I use an even weave wool fabric. Both come from a local fabric wholesaler. And the reason I use wool is we all know that the biotapestry was done on linen. But when I was working the Recuhild Antipendium replica that I did, there wasn't a lot of information with it. And one thing I missed on the little bit of information I had when I was preparing was that it was done on wool. And I didn't find that until I was halfway through
Oh.
this huge altar frontal. I thought, oh, that's really interesting. I've never really worked on wool. So the next piece I did was based on a manuscript illustration of Noah's Ark. And I worked on a Manx tweed, a white Manx tweed, because that was the closest thing I could get to a hand-spun, hand-woven wool, because the tweeds on the Isle of Man are hand-woven on small looms. And it was a revelation, because one of the things, I'm a bit texture obsessed. There are textures I don't like, and I don't very much like the drag that wool makes on a linen canvas.
Hmm.
And it wears the threads, and it eventually, it will break them. Wool on wool is just joyous.
Oh.
It's lovely. It's really, really nice to work with. And that's why I tend to use the wool canvas rather than linen. It's a personal preference. I know there's a historical preference for it, and I prefer wool over linen. So it's purely historical preference. But the number of people who work my kits or come to my classes and, oh, this is really nice, isn't it? This is much nicer than linen. So it's not just me.
That's so interesting because I have a surface embroidery piece that uses wool,
Mm.
and but it's on a linen. So if I were to switch that over to wool, I would maybe enjoy it more.
Yeah. Are
Yeah.
you struggling a bit with it? Or
No, no. I mean, it's what I expect. It's what I've. It's the only thing I've ever
yeah,
known, so I don't know anything different. But
try wool on wool. It's lovely. Really nice.
uh, now when you okay now we got to go into a tangent here. So when you say a wool as a ground cloth, is it rather thin, or do you end up having a thicker gauge to it?
I happen to be making some kits here. This is the wool I use. And if I hold it up to the camera, it has got a pattern marked out on it.
Oh,
You
that's
can
not so
see that
thick.
it's just a tabby woven wool, and it's about the same weight as a linen.
Yeah.
And it's just lovely to work with. I don't know where that bit of black thread's come from. It's just really, really nice to work wool on wool. And this fabric is particularly nice as well.
Yeah, because I can tell when you hold it up there that it really is not much more. Just looks like linen. If you hadn't told me it was wool, I'd think it was linen.
This particular design that I'm making the kits for, I'll show you the front of the kit. It's a little Christmas dragon
Mm-hmm.
that I did as a teaching project. So it's got wool laden couch work. It uses trellis couching. It uses that gilded leather for a bit of sparkle. It's not a medieval design, obviously, but it's also got some countered work, German countered work for the Christmas presents. And you can do countered work on that wool.
Mm.
It was a
Oh,
bit of an experiment, but yeah, you can count it because it's about 30, 36. So it's about the same as most embroidery linens.
yeah. Oh, now I got to try. Now I got to try. Yeah, I don't know if I can get it in the States though, and right now with the tariffs, I don't know if I want to ship
I
anything.
know. Yeah, they're a
Yeah,
pain.
yeah.
hopefully this High Court ruling thing will overrule them. I mean, Royal Mail's worked out a system that they will charge you the tariffs at this end and send them through. So it's 10%, which is not too bad.
Yeah.
I mean, if I import something from America, I pay 20% when it arrives.
Right.
So it's better than ours. But the problem is charging it on the website. The only way I've come up with it is I just have to put a note on saying you'll get a separate invoice for the tariffs if you order from America.
Yeah.
It's the only way I can do it.
Yeah.
Because the shop platform I use doesn't have a selective thing where you can just add tax to things from certain countries.
Yeah.
So
yeah, it's just a pain. But we'll go down a dark hole if we stick with that one. So all right, and now of course we're running out of time. So the books, we got books and classes. So you've got three books?
There's
Wait a minute. No, books. Wait for a second. So your zodiac designs, you got to tell me about those.
Yeah.
Oh man, those are so cool.
The little zodiacs, I did them I was teaching a summer school class for a small group, embroidery group, and we were going to Scarborough. So I just did them for that. They were just for the class, pick which one you want. And I was just putting them on my website. So I'm trying to sort them out as kits at the moment. Plan is to do the individual ones as kits, and then you can order all 3 air signs or all 3 fire signs, or I'll do a big kit for all 12 on one canvas, or all 12 with the sun. So yeah, they weren't meant to be kits. They were just, but sometimes I do things for classes and they just work. It's like, I don't know if you can see over my shoulder. I was at Stirling University this week teaching for the Scottish Embroidery, Stitch and Textiles group, their big summer school. And I'd done the little unicorn in gold and in silver, and they chose them. And I got to doing the teaching example, and I thought, I don't want to do a gold one or a silver one again. So I thought, right, I'm going to do a pink rainbow sparkle unicorn. I haven't put him on my website now. If I take my earphones off, I'll go and show it to you.
Okay, sure. Yeah.
So as you can see, I fully committed to the concept of rainbow sparkle pony.
Yes. Yeah.
So everyone at class, you have to do that one as a kit. We're going to call him Skittles, and he's going to be a kit as well, apparently. I've been told.
So it's the classic musician situation where you put out an album and the one song you didn't think anybody was interested in is the one everyone wants. So same thing. Yeah.
All the kits that I think are going to sell really well, all my favorites are always the worst sellers. So you can never really predict what's going to sell and what.
As long as something sells.
Yeah, it's not worth sitting down and thinking, I'm going to design a best-selling kit, because it's never going to happen. It's going to be the weird things that really take off. It's like, I'm a huge Jethro Tull fan, and Ian Anderson says that he wrote Living in the Past because his agent told him to go upstairs and write a hit single this evening. So he picked the most weird time beat he could find and did it sarcastically, and it's been their best-selling song.
Yeah.
So,
yep. There you go. Yep. You can't ever know. All right. Now we can talk about the books. So we got 3 books. The Bayou Stitch, Naughty Medieval Embroidery. I got to buy that because I got to see that. And then Opus Anglicanum. So was it Bayou Stitch that came first?
It was Opus that came first.
Opus came first.
Opus and Bayou were meant to be just one book of medieval embroidery. And I wrote the Bayou bit that was meant to be the first half of the book. And then I started writing the Opus Anglicanum bit and just went down a rabbit hole, because I was I did it. All of my books, I structure them like courses because that's how they work in my brain. That I start off with something very simple, and then the next project adds another layer of technique, and the next one, and the next one. So the projects get harder as you go through the books, and each project it is a new technique rather than just being a jumble of designs.
Mm-hmm.
And I went so far down a rabbit hole with Opus Anglicanum that I emailed my publisher and said, well, look, this book is going to be a really, really thick book. Do you want to split it into two? And they very kindly said we could split it into two. So I handed Opus over and I was very happy with that. And then I went back to the Buyer Stitch book and I rewrote it and added more projects and added, because there was a lot that I felt when I'd written the first half of what was meant to be one book that I felt had left out of that. So it was nice to be able to go back and play with the crossovers like the Recchihilda Andipendium project, which uses the Opus Anglicanum silk faces in the wool background, and play with the sort of liturgical stuff with the little box, the picks, that really sort of expanded that technique, and it felt much more satisfying. I think if I'd kept both the short halves and made it one book, I'd never have been happy with it.
Yeah.
But
Because
oh,
you'd always know how much got left out. Yeah.
yeah. And I think that the Naughty book is more like the original book I meant to write, because it's got a stem stitch project, and then it's got laid and couched work, and then it's got convent stitch, and then it's got German countered work, and it's got Opus Anglicanum, and it's got white work actually comes at the end, because medieval white work is much more loosey goosey than modern white work. It's just, I'm absolutely certain that the huge variation in stitches was just people saying, well, we need something we can wash, so we have to do it with linen. And linen in the Middle Ages was hard to dye in anything other than blue. So they just used the stitches that they knew in a more textural way. So white work goes at the end because it's kind of using all of the other techniques and slapping them together to make something that is textural. And I took the theme of boobs, bums, and willies because they are very prevalent in medieval art and they are very amusing. And I think there is just a universal fascination with filth, and there is a huge, rich theme of it that runs through the Middle Ages. They
Yeah.
really weren't prudish at all. And, you know, like the white work, there's these little pilgrim badges of a vagina out hunting, and she's got a penis loaded in her crossbow. I just love the idea of doing that absolutely filthy image in this pure virginal white stitching.
Yeah. Oh, I got a chuckle. I looked at several of those photos from the oh man, it's really funny stuff. Yeah. It's very different. Yeah. Yep. Well done. So we got another book coming.
I'm trying to put my proposal together at the moment. I've been meaning to do it for 6 months, but putting the book proposal together is something I can procrastinate about for quite a while. It's starting to come together in my head, and it'll fossilize within the next few weeks, and then I'll be able to write to my publisher and say this is what I want to do, because I have to have a path like I did with the other three. I have to have a logic to the book. It can't just be a scattergun thing.
Right.
There has to be a logic to it.
Well, doing them as a course, I mean, you got to have structure, and I'm sure when you sit down to put them together, that's a complete immersion in creating the designs.
Sometimes you kind of think you've got it in your head, and then when you come down to write the book, you think, no, that needs extra here and less there, and it changes. I don't think any of the books have been exactly what I've written down in my proposal.
Yeah. It's a starting point. Yes.
Yeah, it's just an idea.
Right. Okay, and now we're definitely running out of time. But your courses there's 17 online courses. How do those work?
Well, I'm about to start filming another one. So when I launch them, you get a video, you get a kit to start with, or you can just do digital and get your own kit together. You get a video every 2 weeks, and you can email me for help. And what I do is I work the piece of needlework in a very systematic way, that we start with the easiest bit and we work towards the hardest bit.
Mm-hmm.
So they're very, very structured. And you can do them once I've finished them. You can do them and just get all the videos at once and work through at your own pace. And they're focused on different things. The underside couching masterclass was meant to be a 6 video deep dive just into that one stitch, and I think it ended up being 13 videos. So sometimes you get more than you've paid for if you signed up at the beginning. And there's another one that's just to look at different aspects of doing the medieval face, because that's a lot of people's starting points. Others are to complete a picture that I like. My next one's going to be a dragon to go with the unicorn class, a sort of a balancing piece to it.
Yeah.
So that I have to pick an image I like, that I want to do,
Right.
for a class that's based around an image, because I think you can't work on something that you don't like.
Not usually. No. Yeah. It never gets done, basically.
Yeah, you never finish it, do you?
Yeah. Set it aside, set it aside. Oh, I need to work on it. No, I don't. Yeah.
The thing is, with filming them, it's very difficult to stitch while you're filming, because I find the only thing that really works for me is I have kind of an angle poise arm that my phone camera goes into, and
Uh-huh.
that hovers over the needlework. It is actually quite difficult to stitch with a camera,
Yeah. Well,
because you
yeah, your
can't
hands are
flip.
always in the way, no matter what. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So you still doing live classes too, or is that kind of faded?
Yes. Um, I've got one coming up at the Ashmolean starting in November. I've got various classes for small individual groups, and I'm looking to do some different ones next year. But I've got a class coming up at the Ashmolean. We're doing Saturday and Sunday. We've got a 1-year class where you come back 3 days over 3 different months,
Mm-hmm.
and a 3-year class, which is 9 days over 3 years. The 3-year class is sold out already. We haven't even gone live with it yet. The 1-year class, that's 3 days, has only just gone live, and we've nearly sold out. So we've got a couple of places left on that one.
Mm-hmm. Boy,
But a
busy.
lot of that is people who've been coming back for years. They just like to come back.
Yeah, that's all right. Yep, that works. Yeah, yeah. All right, we have to stop, and that means we have to come back because I had a whole bunch of questions about stitching faces and body shapes and that whole aspect of it. That's fascinating to me because that cannot be easy. Um,
I think there's a style to it, and once you get your eye in it, it becomes more easy.
yeah. Well, I'm okay. We got to see about doing another show just to talk about that. So.
Okay.
All right, so it's Tanya Bentham, Opus Anglicanum Embroidery, and there's a Facebook group, a private Facebook group that
Yeah.
I just joined today that I'm looking forward to, but it looks like it's pretty active, huh?
Yeah, there's lots of people. I mean, some people do things that are just inspired by medieval embroidery. There's a lady who's doing a very abstract cross stitch piece based on embroidery from one of the smaller churches in York.
Uh-huh.
York, I mean, it's really famous for the minster, but there are hundreds of parish churches, medieval parish churches. There's more churches than you can shake a stick at, and some of them are every bit as interesting as the cathedral itself.
Yeah.
Um, so there's a lady doing that, and there's people who do stuff from my kits and stuff from my classes, and people who are just doing their own thing, and it's a really fun group.
Yeah. Oh yeah, I'm anxious to dig into that. Yeah, and see what's there. So, all right, Tanya, thanks so much. And folks, check out her website and all of her kits and her books. And there's some fun stuff in there. I mean, gorgeous stuff, but also some really fun stuff. So, Tanya, thank you so much.
Thank you.
And thanks to everyone for listening.